Hi, welcome to another typology interview. We're doing shadow functions with the Virsaviya. How's it going?
It's going well. How are you?
I'm doing good. Yeah. So this is sort of like a spontaneous thing. You didn't have any time to prepare, which is fine because you're SE Dom, I guess.
Yep.
So I'll put a link to your first interview with us, so people can get to know you if they haven't yet, and we'll dive right into your shadow functions, if that's okay.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're SE Dom. So
Yep.
that means your first shadow would be the shadow of SE, which is SI.
Yep.
So are you aware of SI? Do you organize the sensory?
Yes, very much so. I actually aside quite a little bit. I think part of it is because my mom and my sister are both blasters. They both have OI. And so I grew up in a home where I had no choice but to keep it organized. But also, strangely enough, I had a filing cabinet when I was 14. So I think part of it is coming from my functions. Because I SE, like I gather all the things. I'm a pack rat.
Right. Yeah.
But um, I learned, I don't know, I guess I learned when I was very young that if I organize what I've gathered, then I can gather more. Then it's easier
Right.
to gather because then I can see what
Uh,
is new and what is known.
so you're responsible to gather more and you're just using it so that you can gather more sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
Like,
Okay.
because SE, we just, or OE in general, it only pays attention to the new. So if everything seems new all the time, then that's exhausting. Well, not exhausting, it's um, not true,
Uh-huh.
I guess. But if I organize that stuff,
Right. Would you ever go back through all of the sensory that you've organized?
yeah. And when I
Yeah.
do go back through, it's like a little SE Christmas party because it's
Okay.
like, oh, I didn't know I had this. Oh, I didn't know I had this.
Right.
Um,
So you'll go back through it for the SE and not for the SI sort of thing, not to
yeah,
organize it better and go over it
yes,
again?
yeah. Also, I think part of it is the way ISI is very kinesthetic, and I think it helps my kinesthetic memory in the sense that um, like the files on my computer, for example, everything has a lot of it is organized chronologically. Like my photos are all organized by year because then if I'm looking for something specific, I can go and dig it up. So like I have that SI, or it's usually an NI system to organize my my SE. It's
Okay.
not
Right.
pure SI
Uh-huh.
because the way that I organize is different from how SI is organized.
And what about data? Do you gather data, gather information from SE?
Um, in what way? You mean like, are we talking like Excel spreadsheets or like,
Like consume when you consume things. So
yeah,
you're gathering some kind of SE information, right? Some SE data,
yep.
lots of points about something. So how would you feel responsible, or would you do it? Would you organize all that data you're
Organize
gathering?
it.
Yeah.
Um, I definitely have a desire to, but if I don't do it, it's not the end of the world for me.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Uh-huh.
Like I went to a conference about 2 months ago and I took lots of notes, but I have not sat down and organized it.
Mhm.
And I'm okay with that.
What about feeling responsible for keeping things tidy and neat and washing your car or things like that?
Um, I hate routines, but I also, like, as far as my physical environment, I believe that everything has a home, or everything
Okay.
should have a home. And when I'm okay when things aren't in their home, like if things get a little messy, but in order for me to be productive, my physical environment needs to be clean.
Okay.
Like if there is clutter or messiness around me, I feel like I can't organize my brain internally, and therefore I can't produce. I can't, like, if I am um well, like yesterday I was building out an app for a job I'm applying to, and in order for me to start working on that app, I first had to clean my room, which
Mhm.
is like one has nothing to do with the other, but yet I was
But
doing.
but you were doing it because you wouldn't be able to concentrate on the app if you still had
Yes.
something to do in your room, or if it was
Not
cluttering.
if it was cluttering, yeah. It's
Yeah.
not a sense of needing to do something. It's more of that, like, just sensory distractions, maybe.
Uh-huh.
Maybe that's what it is. I don't know.
Right. Okay. Interesting. Um, do you okay, let's shift gears. We'll go back. I think we'll go back to this. So your FI is your next function.
Yep.
Um, so the shadow of that would be FE. And we were
Yep.
just talking about a little bit about the dynamic between FI and FE while we were just before. So do you FE? Does it feel okay when you do it?
So it's interesting. I wrote this quote down to myself. Well, not quote, this idea because I didn't want to forget it. Um,
Right. Feminine on the
I
intuition.
find, yeah, right. The intuition just goes right out the head. Um, I find that DI, regardless of TI or FI, is always acting from the self, and it's always thinking from the perspective of individuals. Whereas DE, whether it's T or FE, is always thinking from the perspective of the collective. So when I FE, the way I FE is by thinking about all the individual FIs in the room.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas somebody who has FE in their stack, they're not thinking about the individuals, they're thinking about the collective
Mm-hmm.
on the value spectrum, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So I find that, like, yes, I FE, and I throughout my life I've heard things like I make people feel very welcome a lot,
Right.
and I think that is through my FEing, but it FEs in a very FI manner, if that makes
Right.
sense.
We were speaking about like the vibe of the room before. So are you able to pick up the general vibe in the room and see sort of like the spectrum of people there, or you still have to focus on individuals?
Um, yes, no, yeah. I think I pick up because I have feeling as a savior,
Right.
even if it is FI. I pick up on the emotional state of individuals and the emotional state of the room very easily. And
Hmm.
because my feeling is also feminine, it's also very easily influenced.
Right. Okay. Because it's so flowy, you can feel in your FI what the room is doing because it
Yes, yeah, yeah,
influences
yeah.
you. Right.
Yes, exactly.
Uh-huh.
Like, I it's weird that this is the still stuck in my head. I host a Passover dinner every year
Okay.
at my house, and I'm an atheist. I'm not religious,
Okay.
but the traditions and the customs and growing up with it was really important to me. So I host this dinner every year. And this past year, when I was hosting the dinner, and I always have people from all walks of life come to the dinner, is people who are also atheists, people who are of various religions and things like that. And I don't remember, like, the dinner was going well because, I mean, you know what Passover is, but for
Yes.
people who don't, it's a very like ritualistic dinner for Passover, which is a Jewish holiday, the first night or the first 2 nights, depending where you are in the world. And so I'm leading this dinner and all of this is happening. And I said something and it was like the whole room, like the vibe of the whole room just shifted. And I was like, oh my God, what did I just say? I take it back.
Right.
I take it back. Like,
Uh-huh.
definitely felt that huge shift. But case in point, like this happened 6 months ago and I'm still remembering it. So I don't feed that much, I guess.
Right. Interesting. Um, and you were talking a little bit about how it feels weird or wrong to FE as an
To
FI, like
FE.
inauthentic.
I think there's different flavors of FE. I think the one that, and maybe this is the one that's easier for me to do, the one that is taking in the vibe of the room
Hmm.
is easy, then influencing and impacting the vibe of the room. So
Right.
like if,
Even though you have that masculine TE where you can push back on the tribe,
yeah,
it's that FI that's feminine that can't push with the vibe.
um, no, it's the part that you were saying. I find that as an FI user, to FE in the sense like to um, give people emotional states, which is
Uh-huh.
how I think of FE, feels inauthentic and manipulative
Right. There you go.
and ingenuine sometimes because it
Right.
feels, um, well, I think part of it is because, going back to my FI, I don't want people doing that to me,
Uh-huh.
I,
Yeah.
unless it's asked for.
Right.
Um, but we all do it all the time anyway. Like,
So do you feel like that TE is bothering you because you think people need a reason to feel good, and just feeling good for no reason is what's bothering you? Is the TE holding that FE back?
No, that's not a
No.
problem. Because with Save Your Feeling, even if it is introverted, I'm all about the feels. Like if you want to do this just because that's what you want to do, you don't have to give me reasons.
But like you don't feel manipulative when you're doing something, getting something to work for somebody or getting,
Oh, okay.
and
That's
then they're happy because of that, right? They're happy because you got something to work, right? But if you're getting, trying to get them to be happy just for the sake of
yeah.
getting to be happy.
That's a really good point. Yeah, using TE doesn't feel manipulative at all. Using TE feels completely natural. It's like, yeah, that's a really good point.
Okay.
That, yeah, that it's the effing because it's a shadow because it's not in my stack that
Right.
feels um off. Whereas to fix problems for other people or to figure out
Just
what
didn't have a
works for the
reason.
tribe, yeah, is easy.
Uh-huh.
It doesn't feel manipulative.
I see. Okay.
That's so interesting. Yeah. I mean,
um,
we were just talking about this, but I like the
right.
way that you framed it.
So you're, so let's go back to SE then. Do you feel the same sort of way when you're using SI, like sort of like you're going out of your element or being, I don't know, in some way dirty, in some way doing it wrong? Like sensory shouldn't be organized?
Oh, that's a good question. No, not at all.
No.
No. Yeah, my
Okay.
sense I for SE at the top, I really like my sensory organized.
I see.
And what's interesting is the only person to my knowledge who is my exact type twin is Khloe Kardashian.
Okay.
And she is also apparently a very organized person. So there's something in the type that lends itself to that. And I think it might be that even though the SE is at the top, double activated an I, like the way that I organize, Dave and Shannon have a video where they talk about how your observer flow goes from first you gather the sensory, then you organize the sensory, then you look for, gather all the patterns, then you organize the patterns.
Right.
Whereas I go about it where I start at gathering the sensory, then I look for patterns in the sensory, then I organize those patterns, and then I organize the sensory.
Uh-huh. Based on
Does
the
that make
patterns you
sense?
found, you can
Yeah,
organize it.
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. I think SI users, they just want the sensory organized because when it's not,
Right.
it's overwhelming. They don't care the organizational system in the same way. Whereas for me, it has to be organized by some kind of NI pattern
Uh-huh. I see.
and not just like, I feel like the two
But
main
yeah,
organizational systems are color or time for
right.
SI users.
But at the same time, you wouldn't mind if an SI user came with no pattern and organized your sensory environment because it would let you think.
Uh, no, there need to be a pattern.
Oh,
I think
okay.
part of it is that I think that kinesthetic memory is important because if I don't know where something is,
Uh-huh.
like if I don't know where the home is, then what's the point of organizing it? At that point, you might as well just shove everything into a closet and close the door,
Right.
which
Yeah.
admittedly, I think we've all done at some
Right.
point.
Well, SE users especially, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Interesting.
have a friend who lived in the pool house here, and um when he lived there with his girlfriend. When they moved out, they threw a little party and they cleaned up by putting everything into the closets, but when they moved out they forgot about that,
Uh,
so we had to just go and clean the whole place, and we're just opening doors and there's more and more stuff. We're like, where is this coming from?
wow, yeah. So if your friend's watching, write a comment and apologize down below.
He's apologized plenty.
Oh yeah, I'm
um
sure. Yeah. Cool. Okay, so then you're double activated on the NI and not on the TE, right?
yep.
Okay. So do you feel your TE is less strong than your NI, or it's more strong, or you're more comfortable with it? More.
That's an interesting question. I feel equally comfortable with TE as I do with an I,
Okay.
but when it comes to the human need, I am so it's been more than a year since I've been typed. So I've had a while to sit with this
Yeah.
and, to understand how it shows up in my life, what parts of it are valid and what aren't. Um, and this is something that Dave and Shannon mentioned in their video, which is that because my NI is double activated, um, which, by the way, I don't think I mentioned for anyone who's listening, my type is double masculine, SEFI, consume, sleep, blast, play. So I have NI at the bottom, it's double activated. And my T is single activated. So that means I should have more IP like problems. In the first 6, 8 months, I didn't notice that at all. And now I'm like, yes, I see that.
Right.
Where it's not inability to use TE, I can do that. It's the human need for validation and connection that I
I
really
see.
struggle with, and where I always feel disconnected and kind of have that impulse to like flip the table and kind of like, well, I don't need them then,
Hmm.
like, which
Yeah,
is, I
yeah,
think, a very IP sentiment.
yeah.
At least I see that in my brother.
Also, Ben Vasselin had an interesting point. I was watching one of his things, and he made a really good point. So I'd like to repeat it, where he was saying that DE users basically they can get really good at their DI because you don't require other people to practice your DI. You can just sit in your house and read, or you can meditate and stuff like that, and then you can just
Yeah.
practice on your DI without being embarrassed
You
of
don't need
failing.
anything external.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
yeah. And whereas a DI user to go out and use DE, they have to do it with other people, and so
Right.
it tends that DE users tend to be have more access and be better with their DI rather than DI more access with their DE.
That's a really good point. That's a
Yeah,
really excellent point. And I think the other side of it is that um, even as a, like, it doesn't matter what you have in your stack. Dave and Shannon have talked about this, where your wherever your feeling is and wherever your self is, those things are going to influence your behavior. Even if you have FI or FE dead last, like, or DI dead last, yourself and your feeling functions are going to be influencing things. And I think that, so when you are DE, you have awareness of your DI because you can't function without it.
right.
Whereas I know, unfortunately, plenty of people who are Savior DI who don't have awareness of the DE and can continue on functioning
Yeah,
and going about life without that awareness.
right. Yeah, yeah. I get that. So let's assume that you have practiced your TE a little bit, and it's your third function.
Yeah.
So the shadow of that would be TI. Do you TI? Do you know what TI is?
So I've kind of like to separate the shadows. I call them, savior shadows or demon shadows.
Right.
So in this case, TI and NE are my demon shadows.
Okay.
Those are definitely the functions I have the hardest time understanding, let
Uh-huh.
alone practicing.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
like, of all the functions, I think my understanding of TI is the weakest.
Okay.
And I've definitely poked a lot of people to try and better understand how TI works. And
Right.
because I think if I don't have an understanding of TI, then I can't
You can't answer the
answer your
question
question.
even.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
can tell you if
Yeah.
I TI or not.
Right. Okay. So
Try
I'll
to,
ask a
but I
question
can't
in a
make
different way. Yeah. I'll ask the
yeah,
question in a
yeah.
different way. Yeah. Because also, I'm not sure if all of these models are right yet, but Socionics puts TI as a polar function, which means it's going to be weaker than your NE, and you should have no access to it. So, like, this is one of the things I'm trying to
Oh,
figure out as
okay.
well. Yeah.
What do you mean? Could
So,
you expand on that?
well, it's not. I don't. Yeah, it's not something that I've corroborated, so I can't
Oh,
say, like,
okay.
I'm not
Yeah,
going to
yeah,
say
yeah.
this is really what's happening. But yeah, so TI is supposed to be polar for you, which means a blind spot sort of thing.
Oh, okay. So, like, our
Right.
third shadow is a
Is
blind spot
yeah.
for everyone.
Right.
Oh,
Exactly.
interesting.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's what Socionics says, anyways.
Okay.
Yeah. Um.
I guess that's why you were curious about jumpers.
Yes, that's one of the reasons as well. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's an interesting question. Yeah.
So okay, so your TI. Do you value truth?
Yes, absolutely. But I
Yeah.
think my truth is a very NI kind of truth, not a TI truth.
Okay. Can you explain that?
Um, so Lewis Howes and his three truths question.
Right. Exactly.
Um, One, I think I can answer that fairly easily,
Okay.
but I think my answers for that are all NI. Like, I have some friends who are TIFE users, and a bunch of us were camping, and we were, sitting around the campfire chatting. And I brought up this question, kind of curious to see what they say. And there's definitely a different, I don't know, flavor, I guess, that it is an NI sort of truth where it's, um, well, I don't know. I guess that's the thing. I'm still trying to understand. It seems like a theoretical why kind of truth rather than a this is how the world works, but I don't know.
Uh-huh.
Or
So like,
maybe
yeah,
not the world
NI
works.
how
This
the
is
world
what works
works.
for me.
Yeah, NI how the world works as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Um,
how do
yeah.
you see it?
So like one of the things I've noticed between, and it's also from Jung, is between extroverted and introverted, is that extroverted will be more momentary, like more focused on the now, and introverted will be more focused on like an eternal, all prevailing, divorced from the
Yeah.
now, right?
Yeah. Oh, that's a
So
really, I love that.
yeah,
Love that idea.
so your TE would be more looking at solving problems around you in the moment, sort of thing, or
Mhm.
preparing to solve problems in the future that are going to be in the moment, or stuff like that. Whereas TI would be more looking to solve like eternal logical puzzles, where they're more like two plus two equals four, and things that aren't, yeah,
Things that will then influence other, like,
things
impact,
that,
like
yeah,
fundamental truth. Well, yeah.
fundamental truths, yeah, that
We're
are,
using the same words over and over
yeah,
again, though.
yeah,
But yeah,
right. So
that's
like,
okay.
so that kind of truth, is it something that you ever think about, or is it something that means anything to you?
Um, that's I like that framing. I really like that framing. That's helping me understand TI better.
Right.
And I don't think my brain ever really goes there. My brain definitely goes to the NI version of that in terms of like uh understanding what the problem is and why the problem exists,
Uh-huh.
and not necessarily looking at, well, yeah, when I look at solutioning, it's always on the spectrum.
On the
When I look
spectrum,
at,
yeah.
yeah, it's always on the spectrum of it's yeah, the more theoretical,
Right.
um like talking about math, for example. I love math, but I've never had a desire to um
Pursue it.
logic out. No, I've had a desire to pursue it,
Okay.
to logic out the theories myself. Like, I want somebody to give me those theories, and I want to understand them, and I want to be able to use them and apply them, but
Right.
I don't have a desire
Okay.
to sit down and to myself prove that 2 plus 2 equals 4, if
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Right. Yep.
I want somebody to prove it to me.
And what about, okay, so when you do your logicking and your thinking, is it something that you usually involve the tribe in? Or is it something that you also do on your own?
Uh, I don't think logicking requires tribe. I think it, like, especially because I have blast above play, so I
Yeah.
NITE before I SETE,
Right.
so I can simulate whether it's going to work for the tribe or not. I think with a decent
Uh-huh.
degree of success, and then actually doing it. Um, but I, but I'm always simulating whether it's going to work for the tribe, for the collective,
I see.
rather
Okay.
than for individuals.
And what about like contradictions? Someone says two things that he says are both true, but they sort of contradict. What does that do to you? What does that mean to you? Do you need an
Um,
example?
if you have an example, that'd be great.
I can think of one.
Yeah.
Um, so let's say I say that heavy metal is the best genre in the world because of reasons, not
Mm-hmm.
because I like it, because of my reasons on how technical it is and how whatever. And
Mm-hmm.
then I say, but Metallica is a really shitty heavy metal band, or is a really shitty band overall. Let's say that.
Okay.
Sorry,
Okay.
Metallica fans out there. It's an example. Don't hate me.
I know. I'm like
Yeah.
inside. I'm like, wait, what? What's wrong with Metallica?
Yeah, I know. So like
Um.
that's like a contradiction sort of thing. What does that do to
So
you?
that particular example, I don't have a problem with, because I think there's values in it quite a bit.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So like,
Right.
if you don't like Metallica, that's
No,
fine.
I like
But
Metallica, but
if
I just think
you,
they're shit because they don't, technically they're doing bad. Sorry, Metallica fans.
um, but I do think that consistency in application of logic, I do think is important in the sense that
Okay.
like, so to me, the natural inclination is like, well, somewhere something is broken. Something there's some kind of thread that is inconsistent there, where um, either like if you have like technical reason A, B, and C for why heavy metal is amazing, and Metallica hits all of those reasons, um, but and you say like, okay, if a band is A, B, and C, that means that they're amazing, and Metallica
Right.
hits A, B, and C, but you still think they're shitty, then I
Right.
would just say that that's an opinion. Then you can't use your reasons. Like so the mismatch in applying the logic is bothersome if you're claiming
Uh-huh.
to be applying logic. But if you're claiming to be like, no, it's just I just don't like them, then that's
So
okay.
what if if they're still hitting A, B, and C, okay?
Hmm.
And I still had a logical reason why they're not good
Okay.
because of D and E. How does
Then
that contradiction?
I would just say that then D and E need to be updated and incorporated into A, B, and C, or then you need to acknowledge D and E when you talk about A, B, and C, if that
Uh-huh.
makes sense.
Yeah.
So I think in this case, like, I think the NI theory needs to be updated to include the SE being that you don't like Metallica or whatever it is, like you have new sensory, so now update your NI theory. But it's very much like an observer thing
What if,
going on
all
in
right,
my head.
what if I told you that the NI theory doesn't need updating, it's actually perfect and all of my logic holds true?
And I think this is the biggest difference and probably clash between TI and TE. I would say, okay, then prove it. Like
Right.
if you are making this logical assertion, then
So say
as
I
a
proved
trial,
it. All right. So let's say I
then,
proved it.
then fantastic. Then that's
Then
awesome.
you would accept that this contradiction as both being true?
Yeah. I
Yeah?
mean, if there's sensory evidence, or like if I can follow your logic, your thought process, if I'm understanding your question correctly,
Yeah, yeah,
then yeah,
yeah.
I don't have a problem with it.
Okay. And so doing that sort of thing, going through that whole process, is it weird for you or is it's just it's
No,
no.
no.
Okay.
I mean, I'm a software engineer and literally
Right.
surrounded by Stanford students and NASA engineers.
Right.
So that degree of, I guess, geekiness and also being able to hold to contradictory opinions, like it's not, I think my brain wants to reconcile things like that.
Hmm.
Um, but if it's not reconciled, it's not the end of the world for me.
Okay. And what about reconciling it yourself? Do you feel responsible to reconcile it or is the responsibility on someone else to reconcile it for you?
If it's something that hits my FI, then I feel responsibility to reconcile it. If it's not, then I don't care. So
Hmm.
for example, like, you know, we get our types back and some parts are like, oh yeah, that's obvious. Other parts are like, I didn't expect that. And then other parts are, no, that's not me. Or like, no, something isn't right here.
Yeah.
And for myself, for example, being play last was the thing that felt the most foreign for a very long time. And um, I that needed reconciling with everything else. But
Hmm.
because it hit my I took the time to gather more sensory to try and spot the NI and to reconcile that, something that didn't seem to be making logical sense.
Okay, so say we got into those contradictions, okay, that we have a contradiction. What is the reason would you say that those contradictions exist? Why do they exist?
Usually, probably human error.
Human error?
Yeah.
Let's say humans didn't make error. The contradictions coexist. What would be the reason that they coexist? Sorry, I'm asking you really
Well,
TI questions here.
um, well, it's not the TI part. It's I think that just my sensory brain likes examples, so I can work off
Yeah,
of them.
yeah, yeah.
Um, so so you're saying if it was possible to prove to me in a sensorily way that two truths exist while contradicting each other. How
Yes.
would I fare with that?
Right. How would you
If it
how would
was,
you resolve that? Does that make sense to you that two truths can contradict and still remain true?
um, I think if I had sensory examples, like sensory to lean on for that, then I would be okay.
Oh, okay.
That makes sense.
Right. And
Like,
it's okay. So then the reason, what would be the reason that that's able to happen?
I think it depends on the details. I
The
mean, like
details,
this comes up in science, because there are things that happen at
quantum
uh,
level, and
yeah, at a
yeah,
quantum level that don't at a mechanical level.
right.
And right now, those two things contradict each other. But my answer to things like that is that, like, that's usually because our understanding right now is limited. Because I bet you in 50 years, in 100 years, that's going to change and that's going to shift, and we're going to have a
And
very
they'll
different
resolve it.
understanding of it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
exactly. So which is why I said human error,
Right.
because I don't think the world works in a way that ultimately, I don't think contradictions like that exist. I think it's our lack of understanding that
Yeah.
exists.
Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's very Ti and Ni, that answer. So it's good.
Is
Yeah.
it?
Yeah. It works.
Oh my God, I
Um,
can TI. That's good.
there you go. Yeah. Um, okay. So let's talk about your NE then, your last shadow.
Yes.
Do you see the possibilities for the future around you?
NE is an interesting one.
The
Um,
possibilities in the moment?
yes and no. I I think the main way I see NE is um my NE is obviously very amateur and very baby. But it's through NI simulations. So um but it feels uncomfortable to hold them at the same time. So
Hmm.
for example, like I'm at a place in my life, and there's a bunch of different goals that I want to achieve, a bunch of different things. And especially with NIFI as a savior, I'm constantly planning my own future, right? So I can see I can go down this path, I can go down this path, down this path, down this path, and I can see the different paths that I can take to achieve my goals. But I always want to narrow it down to a single path. Like,
Yeah.
I don't like staying in the place where I have several different paths. I like it to be a single one,
Uh-huh.
if that makes
Um,
sense.
what about doing the opposite than that, having a single path, but then broadening it and opening your options to multiple paths? Is that something that you feel comfortable
Yeah.
doing?
I'm yeah, I think so. I think it
Yeah.
depends on what my goal is. Yeah.
Hmm.
Or like having multiple goals, then I'm not sure. I know I don't gather concepts.
Yeah, that's what I was the next question I was about to ask about gathering
I
concepts.
don't
Because
I
like
don't gather
right now
concepts.
you asked about socionics, right? What does socionics say about polar, which is a concept, right?
Yeah.
So that you're trying to gather the concept.
Yes and no. I mean, there is an element of that, but I think it's kind of like um it I okay, so give me the concept that you have. Let me try it on and see if it fits within my NI theory of like the universe and everything.
Right.
And if it doesn't, then it becomes irrelevant and I don't want to hear about it again.
Right.
Kind of then like whereas NE users, they want to hold on to those and they want to know, oh, more and more and more and more. But
Hmm.
like I think I mean, we all do all the things, right? So we're
Yeah.
gathering concepts as well as gathering sensory, whether we want to be or not. Um, I think it's just the concepts that don't attach themselves to my NI fall off.
Right.
Become, especially with feminine intuition, it just falls right out.
What about people giving you concepts that you know are false and don't fit into your theory? What does that feel like, just to be able to sit through it and listen to them go on about these concepts?
Um, well, with consume at the top, if it's something that I don't want to consume, I get very impatient very quickly.
Yeah.
Um, yes. I mean, I will sit through it. Um,
You will.
de- Depending on what is socially expected of the moment.
Right.
Like I signed up for a lecture and I'm at a lecture with like 100 people,
Uh-huh.
and 10 minutes into the lecture I'm like, well, fuck. Then I'll just leave because it's 100
Yeah.
people. But if I'm like at a dinner party and someone is going on about something that's not interesting to me, I'll be polite and I'll be nice and I'll pay attention. Um, but if you ask me tomorrow, I won't remember much of it because it'll fall out of my head because it didn't attach itself to anything.
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. A little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's not
Uh,
my favorite.
yeah. Right.
You understand? You have SE consume at the top too.
Yeah. 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 And he's supposed to be my polar, so it's supposed to be like the TI for you, sort of thing.
Oh, right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Supposedly. Yeah.
Do you see it that way? Or do you
No.
any fairly easily?
I think I any a little bit more
Yeah,
easily than other people.
yeah.
Yeah.
By the way,
So
how's your type sitting nowadays? It's been a while
well,
since we chatted.
we'll talk about that
Later?
after the
Okay.
interview. Sorry. Um,
No, no worries. Yeah, sorry.
um,
One
any
thing that I find to be a very anything that I'm absolutely horrible about is puns. Like when I hear punny people, my brain immediately jumps to any because I think that like that tends to be at least how my brain sees it at anything where um,
really?
you're gathering the concepts of how things sound similar or how their words are interchangeable and playful and stuff. And I
Mm,
just suck at that. With any last and with play last, it's just like it's my kryptonite. But I love it in other people.
right. It might be an NESI thing because I've seen SI people do it too, like puns.
Well, because they're any users,
Yeah.
even if it's
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
demon. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Interesting. I never thought about what types would use puns better, but it's an interesting idea.
yeah,
It's an
yeah.
interesting concept you've presented me with. I will gather it and see if it fits in with my NI at some point.
I wonder if one of the reasons any is more accessible to you is also because of that TI, where the concepts inform, truths, basic truths,
Right.
and
Well, I'm
whatnot.
wondering, like an ENFP, right? So an ENFP, they would take those concepts and use them for their FI. They would
Or their
like the
T.
concept.
Yeah.
Yeah, they would like the concept, right?
Yep. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So they might just gather a bunch of concepts that are cool to them that they don't really care if they're true or not.
Yep.
So like, is that something you can do?
Uh,
Gather cool concepts that are like,
I think I don't know. I haven't given that much thought. I think when I do, I like I struggle with NF consume because I find NF consume to be the most woo woo of all of them.
right.
Which as a sensor is like I'm always a little bit of like, okay, let's put our brakes on that.
Yeah.
Um, but at the same time, like
Kryptonite.
my early 20s, I had a very woo woo part of my life then.
Uh-huh.
I was very much in um, a lot of typical hippy dippy shit.
Yeah.
Like that was a very big part of my life at the time. Like you and I, before I think we got on the call, we were talking about zodiacs and astrology and stuff. Like I
Yeah.
knew my way around all of that at
Uh-huh.
one point in my life. And I think that's what I was doing. I was gathering concepts that were um, interesting to me and that worked for me, but I think I was gathering them into an NI theory of
Right.
life course and everything that I held at the time that has since shifted.
Right. And I guess maybe more for an NI user, those concepts would be more personal and something that's more
Yeah.
yeah, whereas an any user can just use them now and then throw them away and say, yeah, that was fun, let's go on. Like it's a Ouija board sort of thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, that's so true. They do. And the other thing that I've noticed with OE is not that just that we are our obligation is to gather the new. Our obligation is to gather everything, right? So like last week I was playing a video game, Zelda Breath of the Wild, which is a
Okay.
very exploratory game, and I was so surprised by how strongly I was feeling the obligation to gather all of the sensory. Like before I can go do this thing, I have to make sure I not just gathered some sensory, not just explored, but explored all of it. If I didn't pick up that rock over there, then wait, no, hold on a second. My OCD requires me to go back and pick up that rock.
I never
Like
thought about how type plays out in video games like that. That's interesting.
I never did either because I'm not a gamer, but as I was
Right.
playing that game, it was just so much consume, and also definitely sleep above play because it was very much a hold on. I have to prepare. Wait, no, I have to save these weapons. I might need them.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
very stop and preserve.
Pack rat as well. Yeah.
Yes,
In the
yeah.
game.
Oh yeah. Whereas I think like so with NE, I think there's also that obligation to gather all of the concepts, not just some concepts.
Right. Yeah. Well, and okay, so this is something that I've said in the Facebook group that like any users, it feels like they're juggling concepts as if they're babies. And I users is like, I want to hold the baby because it's like, don't juggle it. It's like, it's precious.
Oh,
You can
yeah.
juggle these ones, they're useless, but why are you juggling this one?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's like, well, no, I have carefully curated this thing over years and years.
Right.
Who are you to just step in here and
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
It feels like
Very much so.
disrespecting the concepts, the way they deal with them a little bit sometimes.
Yeah, and I find that to be the case with any of our introverted functions, right? Where
Yeah.
like my TE is gonna feel wrong to your TI because I discard ideas so easily and quickly, right? Whereas you have spent your whole life carefully curating what works for you, and where the values is the opposite,
Well, I
right?
could step in and answer that. Yeah. So I'll play to that. So like a TE user could be like, well, the whole room, like all of these scientists and professional people said A, and you're saying B, you're wrong, right? And when they do that, it just drives me nuts. It's like, that's not an argument. That's not a logical argument. Just
No,
because
yeah,
all of these people said
a
A,
lot of people can be wrong.
yeah, they could all be
And we
wrong.
have,
Like, get
yeah,
into the actual details of the argument and prove me wrong rather than bringing that as your argument, sort of thing.
yes.
Yeah.
And I think that's the um I think, well, maybe not. It was the prove me wrong that sounded very TI, but
Yeah.
I can see TE users as well doing that because TE users are also, best idea wins out. So if you can prove to
Right.
me that this is the best idea, then I'll go with it.
Right. Or prove to me that that idea is better, I guess.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, Virsaviya, let's plug your channel a bit. So you guys are doing a podcast, you and Evelyn. So maybe talk a little bit about your podcast and your YouTube channel. What's going on there?
Yeah. So Objectively Typed, if you haven't heard of it, podcast where Evelyn Cash Santos, she is double masculine, NETE. We were talking about those functions. Play, consume, blast, sleep. She's my podcasting partner. So podcast drops every 2 weeks on Thursdays. And it's also, you can watch it on YouTube. And then also on YouTube, we occasionally post other videos. And Evelyn has a weekly Demon Dialogue series
Right.
where she puts together these wonderful little short videos about various parts of demons.
And you have a surprise because you're going to start doing a weekly thing too, but we're not going to talk about it yet.
Yes.
Right. Cool. So I'll
Way to put a little DE pressure on me.
So
Demon Blast Play. I'll take like
right.
another year before I get my shit together.
Well, it'll happen. So subscribe, and then eventually you'll start
Yes.
seeing your really awesome weekly series that you start producing. Cool.
Yes,
so we'll put the links to that in the description, and have a good one. Thanks a lot, Virsaviya.
Thanks, you too. Bye,
Bye.
guys.